In 2015, Deborah Spar determined 4 phases of the brave new technological frontier: innovation, commercialization, creative anarchy, and rules. With the birth of the digital age, we find ourselves in a flux of radical creative anarchy. As we move from this phase to the next, new rules of thumb are forming in the methods of media production, the 180-degree rules of the digital age. The key to creating a following lies not just in the quality of its content, but understanding the demographic of its audience. To demonstrate these potential rules over creative anarchy, let's sink our teeth into Carmilla.
I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but she's nocturnal, she's so strong, she's at least 80 years old, and she drinks blood.
Well, yeah, but we know she's a vampire. I mean, we've known that since the blood in the milk container, right? Vampire, 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 yeah?
So it's about a girl who goes to university. She's from a protected, small little background, and then her roommate goes missing, and her new roommate ends up being a vampire. Mm-hmm. And it's a love story between the two of them. It's based on an original vampire novella, the first one that was written ever before Dracula even.
The original novella was very much a cautionary tale about female sexuality. It was written during the Gothic era, and at the end of the novel, Carmilla gets beheaded.
The point of our show really is to kind of subvert, do the queer feminist retelling of that novella.
The web series was produced by Shaftesbury and Smoke Bomb Entertainment in 2014, released on their YouTube channel, KindaTV. The series reached over 70 million views across 193 countries, crowdfunded a movie, and is currently in development for a television show. So how does a queer adaptation of a Gothic novella from 1872 lure in its audience? The successful adaptation of Carmilla lies in the entwining of the uncanny and the queer, a common theme in Gothic literature. The Gothic has always already recognised the queer, that which has been constructed as the taboo breaker, the monstrous, the uncanny. Therefore, when creating a modern interpretation of the queer, the uncanny must receive a similar treatment. In Lafanu's original work, the uncanny is portrayed through the use of frame narrative, or the idea of telling stories within stories, and their unreliable telling. In the Gothic, the uncanny is captured by a set of literary conventions that internalise or subjectify events, thus emphasising the break from reality. In Carmilla, these conventions are depicted to bear an uncanny resemblance to reality, rather than signify a break from it. And frame narrative is reimagined through the use of pseudo-authenticity, which allows the audience to experience characters as if they are real people, by mimicking the conventions of popular online media, such as vlogs. From its conception, Carmilla was invested in directly addressing its audience, making them feel included in the story.
Which includes you. If you are on the Silas campus, you are in danger.
The web series is shot from a fixed single-camera perspective, addressing the audience under the guise of Laura's journalism project. The vlogger style also takes into account the limited budget of the original season, limiting the setting to allow most of the action to take place off-screen and be related back to the viewer from Laura's perspective.
So, we did what any normal person would do if they were caught in a flying vortex of modern literature and index cards from the 1970s.
We created a flamethrower using a lighter and some mace Laura's dad gave her.
Which left us trapped in a flaming vortex.
A narrative stance continued and adapted creatively through its 3 seasons.
Hey, hold the camera steady, Jughead.
However, Carmilla embellishes this digital illusion of reality through the implementation of transmedia storytelling, adding numerous interlinking narrative frames. Henry Jenkins defines transmedia storytelling as a process where integral elements are symmetrically divided across multiple delivery channels to create a unified entertainment experience. Due to this, transmedia content allows a potential audience multiple avenues of discovery, creating a broader outreach than a traditional single-platform perspective. So without further ado, let me relate to you just how many media formats the Carmilla universe has converted to the uncanny. Carmilla's first season was supplemented by Silas Confidential, the additional canonic viewpoint of Mhairi Ringwald, a student residing in the dorm next to Laura's, posted on Wattpad. Alongside this, several characters had social media accounts of their own, which updated in tandem with the uploaded episodes. It should be noted that these were likely the route many viewers discovered the series, due to the emphasis on content sharing on social media websites such as Twitter and Tumblr.
Yeah, last semester my roommate turned out to be a vampire and things kind of escalated from there.
Season 2 brought The Voice of Silas, a blog seemingly run by the university's student paper. Season 2 was followed by Season 0, which I'll discuss more in the commercialization segment of this video.
Does anyone else miss the days when all we had to deal with were vanishing girls and university? It was probably only run by vampires.
Season 3 was accompanied by a podcast known as Transmissions from the Pit, broadcasts by Mel and Kirsch to report on the advancement of the Dean of Silas University's descent through the 7 gates of hell.
So, you might have noticed the darkness, as in the sun has been swallowed by the giant fish god that used to live in this awful pit.
The most recent addition to the world of Carmilla is the Carmilla Movie, released online and in select cinemas in 2017. Freed from its pseudo-authentic lens, the film adapts the depiction of the uncanny once more, through the use of gothic dreams and visions. I'll let producers Steph Walkney and Melanie Windle explain their importance.
Those are really prominent in the novella if you've read it.
We didn't have really any dream sequences in...
We didn't, because there was a locked camera. It just allows us to play in a space that's the opposite of a vlog.
And now we get to see things that before we could only describe.
Absolutely.
So we got to move away from the exposition. We got to live in the action, or we get to live in the action for the film.
In its modernization, the uncanny isn't established as a break from reality, but provides multiple frames to its existence. In its transmedia adaptation, the uncanny is maintained by displaying Carmilla through multiple intercepting perspectives. To remain a tale of gothic folklore, Carmilla must never relate her experiences directly. For this reason, Laura and others are essential to the framing of Carmilla as unreliable narrators of her story. The audience is not drawn in solely through the use of pseudo-authentic frame narratives or the use of gothic visions, but in its transmedia structure. Therefore, proposed rule number 1 is employ a transmedia structure. But note that transmedia succeeds when the focal elements of its story and story world are applied to the differing techniques and structures of each media format. So no matter how an audience discovers its content, the founding elements of its story world are made clear. In Carmilla, this concerns her status as a creature of the uncanny, and the unreliable framing of her story, where the truth remains ambiguous and mysterious, much like the Gothic uncanny. Modernizing this concept through the use of transmedia allows for more platforms to provide more paths for more like-minded fans to spread the news among themselves, converting Carmilla to a digital tale of folklore.
As my boss likes to say, no one tweets in anticipation of your next commercial.
Online advertising is in crisis. Over 200 million people today use an ad blocker, and you're about as likely to get struck by lightning as click on a banner ad. This concerns Carmilla as, unless part of a large franchise, digital content cannot rely on network funding. Therefore, financial backing through advertising is an integral part of independent new media production.
In this day and age, the show is free, right? So we have to make it somehow.
So incorporating advertising with the audience in mind is a key concern. The conclusion of its first season, Carmilla appealed to its fans to show their support for the series, to ensure the continual of its funding through the hashtag #SaveCarmilla. To great success, fans actively reached out to the series sponsors, contrasting with the existing relationship between online audiences and advertising. But what did Carmilla do differently to achieve such a positive dynamic between its content, its audience, and its financial backers? And who would advertise through a niche web series about a gothic lesbian vampire?
Oh, I know, let's do one of those demo trial thingies to show everyone how they work. This is a PSA after all. Soda, please?
Pads and tampons, specifically by You by Kotex. Carmilla's audience is 80% female, 2/3 between the ages of 18 to 24. And Kimberly and Clark's You by Kotex were looking to engage with a young female demographic. This partnership was more nuanced than simply retaining a similar audience. Their success lies in understanding the nature of millennial consumers, who in 2014 were also within the age bracket of 18 to 24. Their sponsorship of the series is indicative of a new business model emerging online, where content is given priority over product placement. Millennial audiences place more emphasis on brand ethos over product quality, and are more influenced by brands that appear transparent, authentic, and honest in their advertising. In Carmilla, this was achieved by implying their partnership with You by Kotex over blatant endorsements.
I think millennial audiences are also so attuned to that. They're aware when they're being sold something. We're just very transparent about that.
From the beginning, they knew someone was on board and helping us finance the show. So our pitch to them was really like, let us develop a show that we personally feel passionate about. Let's build an audience. And then after the audience is there, we can also do some kind of branded videos where the connection to the brand is much more prominent, and we've definitely been able to prove a link between viewership and awareness and appreciation of the product.
The branded videos Steph Joakim is referring to also take their millennial audience into consideration. When millennials were asked to identify the most important things brands can do to engage and invest with them, they identified the value of supporting social causes and having a brand personality. They also focus on self-improvement and educating themselves about products. This involves creating advertising that promotes discussion of the issues surrounding its product and its users. In Carmilla, this is incorporated through the promotion of education around menstruation issues and feminine hygiene care, leading to the creation of Carmilla's supplementary content, videos such as Do Vampires Get Their Periods?
Oh, we have a viewer question. How do vampire periods differ from regular human periods?
Unless you count having to drink more blood to replace lost blood, they don't.
At all.
Completely the same as human periods, right down to the ruined underwear. But I still don't see why you're so hot to talk about this.
Well, for one, it's fascinating, and two, this stuff is totally normal, and your pseudo-Victorian sensibilities do not trump my pursuit of knowledge.
These are inoffensive interjections to the canonic world of Carmilla, placing emphasis on character and content over blatant promotion of the product. Plus, the open discussion of menstruation fits well with the series' feminist interpretation of the novella.
Do Vampires Get Their Period? Yada yada, kind of fits in with our show, and the ethos of their brand is the same as the ethos of our show.
The sponsorship's most blatant reference was in Series 0, when Laura and Carmilla discover a set of VHS tapes, footage of a university investigation from 2012. But the brand was incorporated in a humorous and believable manner, while still remaining true to its scripted content and character continuity.
There's like months worth of pads and tampons in here, and Bash said, and I quote, "The moon blood has vanished." So do you think maybe what happened to him at the party might be connected to the whole Red Wing migration, right? The disappearance of Anti-Flo? The fact that there are no beets in this here salad? Do you need me to keep going? Because I can keep going.
By funding great content without stealing the limelight, this creates a positive experience for the viewer, which in turn relates back to the brand as well as the content creators themselves. Advertising in this way creates brand loyalty, as millennial consumers can actually show intense loyalty when brands appear to align with their personal identity, be that a young woman or just a fan of Carmilla. Therefore, rule number 2 is advertise honestly and appeal to the interests of your target audience. And when doing so, identify the commonalities between your sponsor and your audience, and discuss them with emphasis on content over direct product placement. Fund my show, and I'll buy your product. Look after your audience, and your audience will look after you.
They are in total, they are so in love with each other. They have sex, and immediately after,
Your shirt.
Lexa gets shot and dies.
Tara? Oh God.
She dies. The lesbian dies. The bisexual cries over her dead body.
Oh, Tara.
I can't think of a single movie where the queer people get a happy ending. I thought The 100 would be that.
Is she gonna get shot? Lexa! Oh my god. This is Buffy!
The bury your gays trope has been constantly perpetuated throughout media history. The trope typically entails two queer characters expressing their love for one another, and eventually, if not immediately, being punished by the narrative for doing so. The Carmilla novella is perhaps an originating factor of this trope, in its linking with the queer and the uncanny. This continues to be perpetuated in traditional media due to the lack of communication between the queer community and the creators of popular content.
The way that I talked about the show on Twitter, I feel like it set up an implicit promise for people that Lexa would make it and she would have a happy ending. And to me, the only real promise I've ever made about the show is that I will tell the best story I can and that nobody in that story is safe.
However, the stories we tell through media hold consequences out with their narrative context. And the digital age has fundamentally changed the way audiences can address them. What was once a one-way conversation authorised by producers of content is now a multi-channel networked exchange between communities of fans and content producers. The death of Lexa triggered an online movement through the hashtag LGBT fans deserve better. This movement was later established as a charity foundation to promote the positive representation of LGBT characters in media. This is what Henry Jenkins calls participatory culture. Audiences create geographically dispersed communities of interest. This audience outcry did affect the viewing figures for The 100 for a short period, but ultimately the show is still in production today. As online content is reliant on its audience for its potential outreach and funding, it must take into account the wider context of its story world to avoid a negative audience reception. Carmilla's fans call themselves Creampuffs, and their community of interest is what's known as a fandom. The fandom experience is about interacting with other fans and creators alongside the content itself. What makes one web series stand out from another is the intensity of the relationship between its viewers and the content creators.
I was trying to make a very different point than I think the fans seem to want. They wanted her to have a heroic death because she's a hero. I chose to tell a story of the fragility of life and that anybody, even someone as powerful as her, could walk into the wrong door at the wrong time and get killed.
That's okay. I think I got it covered. No, I'm not saying I'd like props for having done all that with broken ribs, but... I'm not scared. I'm not.
After the whole Lexa deserved better uprise of, bury your gays thing, I think I and a lot of people completely trusted you from the beginning to treat it with respect.
I can't tell you how important it is that we just discuss it in detail, not only what the story's saying, but on a meta level. What do our choices mean in a broader context?
Context is essential to the positive depiction of queer death. In gaining investment from a queer audience, Carmilla bears the responsibility to subvert historic tropes such as bury your gays. Firstly, as Elise Bauman notes, this can simply be aided by more representation.
If most of the characters are queer, someone has to die, and then it's just someone's dying instead of the queer character is dying.
Yet to further avoid the bury your gays trope, queer death is never associated directly with queer love or death by accidental means. For example, the fragility of life can be depicted by the circumstances pertaining to death and the attitudes surrounding it. Season 2 of Carmilla saw the death of Danny Lawrence, Laura's rival love interest from Season 1. She is characterised as Laura's brave and loyal warrior and a personification of devotion to the cause. Her death signified the death of innocence in the series and contributes significantly to Laura's fundamental loss of faith at the beginning of Season 3. In The 100, the fragility of life was depicted for shock value, the narrative forced to focus on Clark's abject grief. By writing a queer death scene with thematic consequences other than abject grief, in a similar way to the unexpected intensity of the 100's fandom reaction to negative representation, Carmilla enjoys the spoils of a positive and open relationship between its audience and creators. The cast and crew of Carmilla actively participate in their fandom, encouraging a sense of community.
I think that this fandom was just so desperate for representation, and I think that's what makes the show so important to them and what makes it important to me as well.
In return, the fandom does all it can to keep the community alive, having created their own podcast, even hosting its own convention later this year.
The two things that I think is important for this convention, one is the cast and creators. This is our love story to them.
Given us so much, they deserve to
feel
they have. How much we love them.
Exactly, give back. It's a give back. And then the second part is the fans. It's about the fans, 100%. The fans have kept this fandom going.
And their demand for more content is likely the cause of Carmilla's developing adaptation to television. In the days of creative anarchy, the wider context of the stories that we tell is crucial in creating these communities of interest, as audiences are drawn to content that invigilates their interests, through which they may create communities of like-minded people. Therefore, rule number 3, identify why your audience has taken interest in your content. and validate this growing interest by engaging with your audience as not just the creator, but as a member of its community.
Whatever happens next, we're gonna do it together.
I wanted to do this last bit face to face. It just seemed more authentic. In the midst of creative anarchy, these proposed rules are still being written. And as a queer woman myself, its representation is so important to me, both on and off screen. And I admit that in identifying with it so much, I'm somewhat biased in my analysis. Transmedia will not ensure a following, but employing its structure to embellish a story world has been proven to be successful. Not all advertisers would be as lenient in their creative control as you by Kotex. However, Carmilla is a profitable example of emerging methods of advertising and funding content online. And lastly, Carmilla's audience didn't need to embrace its content so wholeheartedly, but they did. This is because in the digital age, the audience is growing increasingly more culpable for the continuation of content as its creators. By creating online communities around their content, online creators can comprehend the global context of the stories they're telling, creating content mindful of the interests of its audience. And by doing so, have created an environment where the creator and the consumer must invest in each other to gain critical acclaim. Therefore, the responsibility of the direction of new media and these new rules we're founding lies with you as much as it does content creators. If you love something, participate in it. Like, tweet, reblog, share, make a video essay. Because, just as Carmilla always says,
we could live forever and suffer. Die as one, together as lovers. Oh, 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 oh. Love will be cruel to who it entices. Love will have its sacrifices.